There's a Japanese aesthetic concept that explores beauty within the unknown, the appeal of mystery. It is called Yugen, but Yugen is not confusion or obscurity for its own sake. It is the beauty of what remains hidden. Seeing a ship far out at the sea disappear into the fog, seeing the ruins of something once majestic, reading the fragments of lost history. Not knowing is the point of this concept. Well, you can already see where I'm going with this, so keep Yugen in mind. I will loosely return to it throughout the video. With that in mind, let's shift the topic entirely because why not? What is the best Souls game? If you answered with a certain game, your subjective opinion is wrong. I don't recognize your personal taste and you should be ashamed of yourself. Each of the 7 games, including Dark Souls 2, yes, is a masterpiece that shines in entirely different ways. That being said, of course, each game also comes with some questionably evil moments that I have grown to love over the years. Obviously, the combat, the soundtrack, the lore and the boss fights are what make these games special and successful. But that part is obvious. Gale slowly walking towards you in the middle of a thunderstorm, 2 godlike warriors clashing at the end of the world. But there's more to what makes these games so appealing. So, what is it? What makes each game special and how exactly do they do it? There are so many aesthetic concepts you can relate to these games, but one concept I find relevant to all 7 games is quite simple. It is called Honkadori. It is the illusion of invention within recurring concepts. Honkadori takes part of an old poem and gives them a new life. A simple river from a poem written a millennium ago may appear again in a brand new poem written in a completely different age. This is basically how From Software improves with each game. Take something iconic, keep it the same but adjust it to the expectations of the present. We will talk about each game, lots of yapping today, because I've been busy touching the grass for the past 2 months, so I have to make up for the lost time and money, so let's see where it goes. I decided not to include Demon's Souls because I genuinely believe everything Demon's Souls did well was done even better by the other Souls games, and I also didn't feel like replaying Demon's Souls again. Okay, let's start. Dark Souls 1 has always been special to me. Why, you may ask? Because it's a good game, duh. I played it from start to finish countless times since 2012, and to this day I still feel like randomly booting up the game and playing it until I beat Ornstein and Smug, and then abandoning that character forever. Maybe there's a universe where Lost Isolate was properly developed instead of becoming the abandoned mess that is, but it is not this one. What Dark Souls 1 does so well is obviously its atmosphere, and by that I'm not talking about the clouds blocking the sun, the cracked castle walls covered in moss, the ruined streets full of bandits, knights and soldiers of a once mighty kingdom. It's not just one of those things on its own, it's when they all come together that they create the perfect setting. The entire world of Dark Souls exists because of one perfectly tragic character who is too stubborn to let go. Okay, I'm going to use a lot of Japanese concepts and philosophies throughout this video because I think they fit the From Software's design choices really well, so bear with me. In Japanese philosophy, there's a term called muga. Even though it is not the perfect translation, it can be understood as selflessness. It's not about existence as human being, but about the absence of a permanent self. You may think, I am me now, but I was also me as a child. And I will be still me tomorrow, but your body changes, your thoughts change, your memories change, there's no permanent me in life. And this is where Muga comes in. Can you find the permanent me in anything? If I push the boundaries really hard and try to relate it to Dark Souls, most suffering comes from defending an imaginary permanence. If I possess the light soul, I will become my true self. If I defeat the dragons, if I begin an age of fire, if I banish the pygmies, if I rekindle the first flame, I will preserve who I am. And that's how Dark Souls 1 is built. It has the strongest atmosphere of any Souls game because no matter where you go, everything is the result of one man's ambition to protect protect an imaginary self that should have never existed. A kingdom deep underground, buried beneath an ocean of lava because the righteous god of sunlight needed to restore his power. A once godlike dragon, completely disfigured, living in darkness and hiding from the same god of sunlight. Everything comes down to the same person. If I walk around in Blighttown and accidentally step on shit, there's a good chance it was Gwyn's another desperate attempt at restoring the glory of his kingdom. The atmosphere is at its strongest when all the NPCs are hollow, without any goal or hope. Every kingdom is abandoned and dying. The land is covered in horrors that should have never existed. What even are you? All because of one self-proclaimed god's ambition. And the best part is, every single character tries their best to hide it from you. They portray Gwyn as the god of sunlight, the one true way out of darkness. You are the chosen undead, even though it doesn't mean a thing. You spent the majority of your journey serving the very thing that caused all of this. And this is why Dark Souls 1 has an atmosphere that remains unmatched. Every scene before you shares the same underlying cause that ties everything together. Despite its absurd high fantasy scale, it feels grounded, it feels natural. There is a story that creates the atmosphere, and that atmosphere tells you the game's real story, while every NPC you encounter lies to you and twists the truth. Why is New Londo destroyed? What is the reason behind Ulysses' fall? Why does Gwyn possess a painted world? From start to finish, the game has a heavy, depressing setting, and Dark Souls 1 is best at supporting that atmosphere with an actual background. Okay, enough with Dark Souls, let's talk about the other Dark Souls now. When Dark Souls 2 came out, I was its #1 hater. If it had only one hater, that was me. I watched those Dark Souls 2 graphical downgrade comparisons and I was furious. It looked worse than the previous game, the atmosphere had been completely butchered, when in reality they had just changed the contrast and made the game brighter, and swapped out some textures. It wasn't their best work, but it was still fine. Their intention was clear. Instead of making the same game again, they wanted to explore a different setting. With the release of Scholar of the First Sin, I finally accepted Dark Souls 2 for what it is. I had my character development arc, I spent a good chunk of my pocket money buying the game instead of actually having lunch at school, and despite my initial reaction back in 2014, I learned to love Dark Souls 2 for what it is. Well, Dark Souls 2 takes place in an entirely different setting. Honor Londo, the wannabe gods, Kart, Logan, hell, even Patches is missing. But the difference isn't just the characters or the world, the entire game design is different. Dark Souls 2 is basically a 3D Metroidvania with Souls mechanics. Remember how if you get stuck in Elden Ring, you can just go somewhere else and complete another area instead? This is basically the entire design philosophy behind Dark Souls 2. You take one boss down, it opens 3 different paths. Pick one, go there, get your ass kicked, turn back and try another one. It is basically the gameplay loop of Symphony of the Night, only more forgiving. Despite being a linear game, it constantly gives you multiple paths to explore. Just started the game, I already have a bunch of options. I can go to Forest of the Fallen Giants for a traditional start, or the Tower of Flame for some quick, easy souls, or head straight to the wannabe Quellac Scorpion Lady and begin the journey massively overleveled. Its map is also probably the most diverse among all Souls games. Every location feels like an entirely different scene. A frozen wasteland, a castle in the middle of a volcano, a dragon-worshipping kingdom deep underground that is hated by a bunch of angry rats, literal hell on earth with an ugly frog at the end, a castle in the middle of a swamp that connects to nothing yet somehow also connects to a volcano. Every location is unique. You don't just go from one ruined castle to next ruined castle followed by another ruined castle. If there's one game that deserves a faithful remake, it is Dark Souls 2. The locations are already incredible as they are, but one quick look at Dark Souls 2's concept arts will show you that this game still has so much potential. Unlike the other Dark Souls games, Dark Souls 2 is more about people living in a cursed world than gods and chosen undeads trying to shape that world. Vendrick almost cures the undead curse, only to be betrayed by his wife, and despite his unmatched power and experience in the battlefield, he can't bring himself to challenge and kill her. So, he locks himself up and goes hollow. Lucatiel is just a knight, slowly losing her humanity as she explores an alien world. Mild-mannered Pate and Creighton the Wanderer are two criminals, constantly going back and forth and trying to take each other down. Apart from its incredible map and world design, Dark Souls 2 is the story of people living in the wrong age. Despite having no answers and no way out, they do their best to fight the curse consuming their world. It is the perfect game in between. While Dark Souls 1 is the beginning and Dark Souls 3 is the end of the world, Dark Souls 2 is the quiet moment in between with no solution and no answers. It's an incredible game because of what it tries to accomplish rather than simply trying to continue what made the first game successful. And the map variety, the branching paths and the scale of each location makes Dark Souls 2 the best semi-open world game in the franchise. I'm feeling Bloodborne, so let's do Bloodborne next. After all, it is the I haven't always been a Bloodborne enjoyer. Not because I didn't find the game interesting, put down the pitchforks, but because I literally had no way of playing it. With the Super Nintendo being the only console I had ever owned, buying a brand new console just to play Bloodborne was an impossible goal. But now, with the emulator practically running Bloodborne as good as it gets, I've been playing Bloodborne over and over again for the past year. The lore was never something alien to me, but experiencing it firsthand is a completely different feeling. And now I understand all those people spamming "Where is Bloodborne" under my earlier videos a little better. Well, I still think Bloodborne fans are the loudest and usually the most annoying part of the Souls player base because there's a tiny annoying part of the community who love Bloodborne simply because it is exclusive and it makes them feel special, not because it is an actual incredible game. There are countless things to love about Bloodborne, but if you ask me what makes it so unique, apart from the boss fights, the soundtrack, the story and the combat, I would say it is the consistency of its art direction. Think about Dark Souls 1, first half and the second half feel like completely different games, or Dark Souls 2 where every location is so distinct and different. The same goes for Elden Ring, Sekiro and Dark Souls 3. It is incredible how unique each part of those games feel. The diversity in their art direction makes them incredible games. Bloodborne is a bit different on the other hand. Its entire art direction follows an eldritch aesthetic combined with Victorian architecture and Elizabethan fashion. It commits itself to a single artistic vision that is rich and detailed. It scales the world down to a single city, yet adds so much history and storytelling to every location. Every street, every building, it all feels real. If a street exists, there's a good chance a story lies somewhere in the corner. The moment I stepped outside that clinic, I could tell there was something strange with this city. But I'm not talking about the scourge beast I had just slain or the random screams in the distance. Those are pretty standard for a Souls game. Abandoned carts, citizens marching with pitchforks, chaotic streets, they're all desperately trying to tell me a story. Every corner is filled with coffins wrapped in chains, and that's the part that caught my attention in the early hours of the game. The dead might be coming back to life, but that's not very interesting, we have seen that a billion times. What makes it interesting is that the chains might be there to keep the living away from the coffins. During the Victorian era, universities, medical schools and private clinics were in constant need of bodies for studying. That's how body snatching became a profitable underground business. Body snatchers would rob graves and sell the bodies to medical schools, which eventually led to people chaining the coffins before burying them. I had barely started the game, and I was already seeing references to the Victorian era. It's not just the architecture or the clothing, even the smallest details represent the time period they are borrowed from. The fact that there are chained coffins everywhere tells me that this was a medically advanced city that openly experimented on the human body. Citizens hide inside their homes, some are having a party, some are waiting for their family to return, others are out there hunting, tearing the city apart. Old Yharnam's narrow streets are long abandoned and infested with horrors. There is something interesting around every corner. It is a proper nightmarish city with so many layers built on top of each other. Bloodborne takes a single setting and keeps building upon it throughout the entire game. Every corner is part of the same nightmare. Every single location tells a different story that ultimately leads to the same conclusion. Bloodborne's consistency in art direction and its ability to create so many distinct locations filled with detail while staying within a single setting is, without a doubt, the best among all Souls games. Well, it's cool and all that, but what makes the next game unique? After Dark Souls 2's branching world, Dark Souls 3 is so linear it hurts. Its level design, especially the vertical exploration, falls well short of Dark Souls 1 and Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2, but Dark Souls 3 is still an incredible game and one of the strongest in the entire franchise. When I think about what this game does better than all the others, it has to be the boss fights. Every Souls game has at least a couple of amazing fights. Manus, Artorias, Ornstein and Smog were mind-blowing at the time. Ivory King, Fume Knight and Looking Glass Knight are pretty good for Dark Souls 2 standards. Ludwig, Maria and that stupid screaming baby on the beach. You get my point, every game has some truly great fights. Dark Souls 3 on the other hand is one banger boss after another. Apart from Ancient Wyvern, that giant tree at the start of the game, the annoying witch and the Deacons of the Deep, almost every other boss fight is pure cinema. The game starts with Gandir, probably the best tutorial boss I have ever seen in the Souls genre. He is not some generic demon with only 3 attacks. He has an intimidating design, but despite how threatening he looks, he is incredibly easy to read, making him the perfect tutorial encounter. Ward of the Boreal Valley is another great example. Great design, great soundtrack, he's very easy to defeat, but he's still a genuinely challenging encounter for new players. Despite their lower difficulty, early game bosses never feel like generic encounters. The Abyss Watchers are quite easy. You can parry them, you can backstab them, stagger them, and even hide behind those somewhat friendly mobs, but it is still one of the coolest and most entertaining fights in the entire series. Dark Souls 3 knows how to make every boss, regardless of difficulty, look important and intimidating. The second half of the game and the DLCs contain some of the best fights in From Software's entire history. Demon Prince is probably the best duo fight From Software has ever designed. It is such a good fight that it practically mocks every duo fight in Elden Ring. And this is not just the gameplay, the stories behind Dark Souls 3's bosses are on another level as well. Pontiff Sullivan has such a fascinating lore that you could make an entire movie about him. The same goes for Gale, Sister Frida and Champion Gandir. They are not just great fights, their stories are just as memorable. A tyrant taking over a peaceful painted world and forcing it to decay, a legendary king consumed by darkness before he could link the first flame, another king whose design was so unhinged that they had to nerf the looks so the game doesn't get censored across half the globe. Especially towards the end game, Dark Souls 3 never drops in quality. I haven't even mentioned Nameless King or the Twin Princess. When it comes to boss fight quality, nothing comes close to how consistently excellent Dark Souls 3 is. Perfectly balanced damage and health numbers, soundtrack, moveset, everything about Dark Souls 3 bosses is pure cinema. But this isn't the only game that shines with the boss fights. I wonder what is the next one. A lot of people don't consider Sekiro a Souls game. My opinion on that is, I don't care. It's not that deep. Miyazaki made it, that's all I need to hear. Sekiro has two things going for it, boss fights and combat. When I look at the overall boss lineup, I think Sword Saint Ishin is easily one of the best fights in From Software history, but Dark Souls 3 still takes the crown for the boss fights overall. So, let's talk about the combat. Oh, and speaking of combat, let me slightly go off topic. If you're a Sekiro combat enjoyer, open Steam right now and download the new Onimusha demo. Onimusha is obviously not a Souls-like, and if you even dare to call it one, you should be ashamed of yourself. It is an action game that existed long before the Souls series, and now it is making a comeback with Onimusha Way of the Sword. The reason I'm bringing it up is because its combat is quite literally the best swordplay I have ever experienced since Sekiro. It almost feels like a modernized evolution of it, and it is a major Capcom title, so you already know the animations and the combat flow are going to set the industry standard. Anyways, if you like Sekiro, go try the demo, you won't regret it, it's free, it takes 20 minutes to finish. Okay, back to the video. Sekiro's combat has one major advantage over every other title. It chooses quality over quantity. There's one weapon and one core moveset, so every enemy and every boss is designed around a single playstyle. Obviously there are combat arts, shinobi prosthetics, but that's not the same as having dozens of different weapon classes and completely different movesets. Sekiro's combat shines because it breaks away from the traditional style where two characters simply take turns tanking hits from one another. It's about clashing swords, maintaining pressure, and controlling the flow of the fight. Once you truly learn a boss's moveset, it becomes a constant cycle of attacking and deflecting until one of you finally loses the posture bar. Genichiro is the earliest example. He's basically a mid-game tutorial boss who teaches you that this is in fact a rhythm game. Timing is everything. Audio plays such a huge role that this is probably one of the only Souls games that you could play blindfolded. Ishin is where the combat reaches its peak. By that point, the game has taught you countless mechanics: Mikiri counters, deflecting sheeted attacks, lightning reversals, aerial combat, and then game throws all of them back at you in a single 3-phase boss fight. It is a personal thing, so it would be difficult to say Sekiro has the best combat in the Souls series. Someone who enjoys fast, dodge-focused combat would probably choose Bloodborne any day of the week. Someone who wants to fully embrace the fantasy of being knight or a mage would probably choose Dark Souls or Elden Ring instead. I'm not saying Sekiro has the best combat, but I do think it has the most unique, cohesive, and balanced combat system of any Souls game. So that was that, and now the big final, the game that gave AAA studios nightmares: Animal Crossing. Homer, Joseph Campbell, Matsuo Basho, and Dante Alighieri all have something in common. They write about journey rather than the reward waiting at the end. The Odyssey is more about 2 decades of traveling shaping Odysseus rather than it's about him returning home. Basho built an entire aesthetic around wandering. According to Joseph Campbell, the treasure is symbolic. Myths repeatedly disguise an internal transformation as an external quest. Being the largest game in the series, it is obvious that freedom in Elden Ring just hits different, and I'm not talking about the exploration, but let's start there. Remember when Todd Howard walked onto that stage and said there were going to be 1,000 planets in Starfield? That was the moment I knew I was never going to play Starfield, because he had just announced that his game was going to be a procedurally generated garbage, filled with copy-pasted points of interest that tell no story, or Horizon Zero Dawn. I found the main character interesting and the world looked fine, even though I generally dislike post-apocalyptic modern settings mixed with medieval fantasy. But the moment open world unlocked and became nothing but cleaning bandit camps and climbing those dinosaur-looking robots to reveal the map, I completely lost my interest. Basically, it is what we call the Ubisoft open world. Imagine intentionally making your single-player games grindy and boring, so people pay extra money to buy XP boosters. No wonder nobody takes them seriously anymore. When an open world doesn't tell you a story or doesn't serve a purpose, I don't see the point of filling it with random empty spaces. You just run around an extra 5 minutes in between each objective. In Skyrim, exploration is incredible because no matter where you go, if you stop for a second and look around, the scenery looks like it came straight out of a painting. Immersion feels natural. That's why at least once a year I get the urge to download the game again. And Elden Ring? It has the best open world I have ever experienced in that regard. An entirely handcrafted map where everything you see exists to make your journey more meaningful. Back when Shadow of the Erdtree was released, I said exploration was generously rewarded. I remember a couple of angry comments saying I was glazing the game and that the rewards were garbage. Well, they had a point. If the only reward you expect from exploration is some overpowered shiny item waiting at the end of the road, then Shadow of the Erdtree and even much of the base game doesn't always deliver that. But my idea of rewarding exploration has always been different. When I walk into a catacomb and spend my time exploring every single corner, discovering that the main path actually leads me into a completely new area instead of simply looping back to where I came from, that is my reward for taking my time to explore. When I stumble into the Abyssal Woods where even Torrent is too scared to appear, and I have to improvise fighting unfamiliar enemies, when I get to uncover new lore and explore an abandoned mansion consumed by madness, this is the reward. or when I take a random elevator and accidentally discover an entire underground world, spotting countless other mysterious locations in the distance, learning how an entire civilization once lived there, and how as punishment they were never allowed to see the real stars again. That is the reward. You turn one random corner and suddenly you have unlocked hours of entirely optional content, simply because you decided to look around. Elden Ring puts so much effort in optional content and random corners of the world. When I spend the time trying to get up to the random structures I see on the map, and it somehow pushes me into a brand new questline with dozens of hidden locations, I know this game generously rewards exploration. That freedom of exploration is what makes Elden Ring what it is. Well, I just realized I completely forgot about Elden Ring Nightreign, but it is too late to write about it now. I'm kind of feeling lazy, so let's just pretend it doesn't exist. I don't know. I literally forget about it. Alright, that was all for today. This is pretty much what I believe each game does the best. I will be down in the comments, so see you there, and see you on the next video.